Colleagues, this morning, in an act of outrageous absurdity and moral bankruptcy, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court announced that he will seek arrest warrants for Israeli leaders and Hamas leaders. This is despicable and unforgettable day on which an immoral equivalence is being made between a terror organization and the leaders of a vibrant democracy. This is a dark day for the international community and a dark day for international institutions. Israel suffered the most brutal massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Men, women, and children were targeted and murdered. Babies were burned alive. Rape and sexual violence were widespread. And from October 7th until today, Israel has been fighting against this evil to bring our hostages home and to prevent such atrocities from ever happening again. Israel is fighting for her future, justly, morally, and in accordance with international law. Yet, to the ICC prosecutor, the genocidal terrorists hold the same moral standing as the leaders of the law-abiding state of Israel. It is unfathomable. It is an immoral distortion of epic proportions. This is a blood libel, a witch hunt driven by pure Jew hatred and political interests. But even more than that, this is a clear sign of what international organizations have become. These international institutions, be it the ICC, the Human Rights Council, UNRWA, and other bodies, were established with the best of intentions. But now these organizations have lost their way. The International Criminal Court is now a weapon of criminals and terrorists. Their moral compass has broken. Today, the forces of evil have physical weapons. They have missiles, rockets, drones, and guns, as you've seen. But beyond these tools of war, they also have diplomatic and legal weapons, an arsenal of evil which includes the weaponization of this institution and its bodies. All have become tools in the hands of monsters, and you continue playing along, playing directly into their hands. Wake up! Look at the world burning around you. Just this morning, you held a moment of silence to commemorate the mass murdering president of Iran. A month ago, Raisi, as the Iranian people call him, the butcher of Tehran, launched an unprecedented missile and drone strike on Israel to murder thousands of innocent Israelis, deliberately. The blood of thousands of innocent Iranians is on his hands. Women, members of the LGBTQ community, peaceful protesters, and many, many others. He is responsible for butchering thousands around the globe. Thousands. This is who the Security Council dedicates a moment of silence to? A terrorist? A man who murdered, oppressed, and imprisoned so many? How can it be that your list of moral priorities is so distorted? This council, which has done nothing to advance the release of our hostages, commemorates the man responsible for their suffering. What's next? Will the council hold a moment of silence for bin Laden? Will there be a vigil for Hitler? We wouldn't be surprised. Council members, this is a dark day for the ICC. This is a dark day for the Security Council. And this is a dark day for all the international bodies that have become weapons in the hands of murderers. Merely 4 days ago, 4 days have passed since this council heard the chilling testimonies of released Israeli hostages, of the heart-wrenching story of a mother whose son's body is being held in Gaza by terrorists. You waited over 7 months to hear a single word from released Israeli hostages, but it took only 4 days to forget their gut-churning stories and hold a discussion on how to prevent their release, because that's what you're doing here today. Here we are in a formal, this time formal, council meeting, continuing to do nothing productive to advance their release, the hostages' release. Instead of working to bring them home, you are convening to find ways to keep the hostages in Rafah. This council doesn't function through logic or morality. Sadly, it is simply a political tool exploited by some members to advance skewed agendas, because they can ask for additional council meetings time and again, time and again. What started this war was not the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It wasn't an impending operation in Rafah. What started this war was the sheer evil perpetrated by Hamas. And the way to end this war is not by discussing Israel's operation in Rafah. It is by finally holding the murderous terrorists accountable. Israel entered Gaza to bring our hostages home and to ensure that Hamas cannot pose a threat to Israelis. It is that simple. We didn't want to be in Gaza. We don't want to be in Gaza. We have no intentions to stay in Gaza. This is only about saving lives and defending our future from a terror organization. And what is the focus here today? To again give the terrorists immunity. So colleagues, do you honestly think that Israel wants to operate in Rafah? Let me clarify. No country seeks to avoid an operation in Rafah more than Israel. No country, because it is our best and brightest that are making the ultimate sacrifice there, not yours. But there are still thousands of Hamas terrorists in Rafah, and you ignore them. Hostages are being held there, and you ignore them. And Hamas leaders are hiding in Rafah, and you ignore them. We have already uncovered 50 terror tunnels in Rafah, 50. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. What do you expect Israel to do? What would your countries do about everything that I just mentioned? Is there an alternative? Should we pray to God that Hamas just disappears? Is there a magic spell that we should cast to make sure that October 7th is never repeated? Every day we learn of more hostages murdered by Hamas. The clock is ticking, and we must take every step to bring them home. This is why a counter-terror operation in Rafah must take place. There is no other choice. You cannot extinguish a fire by putting only most of it out. It will spread again, and you know it. The fire of terror is burning in Rafah. Sadly, there is no alternative. But if this council wanted to take steps that could truly advance an end to this war, then I have a proposition for you. Designate Hamas as a terror organization. Impose sanctions on their leaders. Demand that they release the hostages and put down their arms. Show them that the council no longer follow their script. This war can end today, tomorrow. It's up to you. If Hamas returns the hostages and surrenders, not one more shot needs to be fired. Why are you not echoing this message to the world? It is Hamas that murdered and brutalized Israelis. It is Hamas that is holding 128 hostages. And it is Hamas that has sworn to commit the atrocities of October 7th again and again until Israel is destroyed. Call out the terrorists. Tell the Gazans who it is that is truly responsible for their suffering. Colleagues, when it comes to the evacuation of civilians from Rafah, my heart truly goes out to them. It is terrible. It is truly terrible that they have to be evacuated. Many of them not for the first time. I agree with you. But the removal of civilians from an active war zone is not an act that should be condemned here. It is an act that should be supported, especially by a council mandated to uphold security and protect life. Close to 1 million civilians have already left Rafah, and more are leaving every day. They have moved to a designated humanitarian zone that is being filled with aid. And our hope is for as many more civilians to leave Rafah and move out of harm's way. Because you know why? Because temporary evacuation is reversible, but the loss of life is not. Israel is advancing its operation in Gaza slowly and carefully. Despite the fact that any military expert would tell you here that wars are won by taking swift and overwhelming action, but we try to mitigate as many civilian casualties as possible. What do you expect us to do? Should we grant immunity to the terrorists still in Rafah? Have you considered the message this will send to terrorists worldwide? What is the message here? Hide behind your civilians and receive immunity from the Security Council. Mr. President, today the Council chose to continue sitting idle. What the Council should be doing is taking action. Action against Hamas terrorists, action against Iran, and action against all those who seek to deliberately murder, rape, and destroy. Utilize your power and pressure the terrorists. Help bring this war to an end with Hamas eliminated and our hostages returned. Help us bring a brighter future for all. Thank you, Mr. President.